You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Do you know where your coffee comes from? I don't mean the coffee shop on the corner. I mean the soil, the farmers, the forests. Because the truth is, when we're disconnected from our food, powerful systems get to operate in the dark, unchecked, unchallenged, and unaccountable. But imagine starting your day not just with a nice hot cup of coffee and a little caffeine, but with clarity. Imagine knowing your coffee wasn't grown through deforestation, slave labor, or toxic chemicals, but through dignity, transparency, and care. You're listening to One Bite is Everything, the podcast that connects the food on your plate and the coffee in your cup to the rest of the world and makes sure that you are connected to your food because it matters, one story at a time. I'm your host, Dana DiPrima, fellow coffee drinker, here to explore the stories and systems behind the food we think we know. Today on this show, we're asking what's really behind our morning cup of coffee and how did it get this bad? To help us break it down, I'm joined by Etelle Higonnet, founder of Coffee Watch. She's spent years investigating deforestation, labor abuses, and corporate cover-ups, especially in the coffee industry. In this episode, you'll learn why coffee is one of the biggest but least understood drivers of deforestation and human rights abuse. What the certifications on your bag of beans aren't telling you, and how you, with the same habits you already have, can help shift the system toward justice. And there's one thing we uncover about how decaf is made in the United States that may seriously change what's in your cup from now on. So if you're ready to reconnect with your food and stop being taken advantage of by systems that profit off your blind spots, then grab a cup of coffee and stick around for this episode of One Bite is Everything.
Most people go to a cafe, order a coffee, and they're thinking about, is it dark roast or light roast? Is it decaf? Is it a cold brew or an oat milk latte or flat white? What they don't process is that they're choosing slavery, deforestation, child labor. They're choosing human trafficking, extreme poverty. Most people are nice people. I believe that humanity is mostly composed of good, normal people who do not want this, but they don't know. Most people that I have spoken to about coffee, which is a lot, they have no idea. They're horrified. They do not want this. They feel like the industry is doing something terrible, that the certification schemes are failing them, that the governments who should be stepping up to fix this are asleep at the wheel. And my dream at Coffee Watch is to hold the industry accountable because there just doesn't seem to be a lot of accountability. And that's wrong. And we have to change it. And we can absolutely drink better coffee. There's better coffee out there. So just to walk you through, in detail with stats, coffee is the number 6 driver of deforestation on planet Earth. That is very bad. It is number 6. It's not number 20 or 200. This is why its greenhouse gas emissions are through the roof. But it's not just deforestation. It's got pesticide-soaked monoculture that has a huge impact on carbon and biodiversity too. Deforestation is bad for carbon, but so is monoculture. So there's a lot going on and people do not know. And if they knew, they would not agree.
So explain a little bit more what you mean in terms of coffee's role in deforestation.
The way it pans out is most coffee is grown on what used to be forests. And if you want to grow new coffee plantations or farms, typically that happens at least in part at the expense of forests. So let's say farmer Etelle is out in Brazil, Indonesia, Colombia, Vietnam, whatever. I chop down a forest. I plant these bushes. They might be full sun monoculture or part shade, which is a little bit better, right? But still, that was a bad thing that I did. I wait a bit. My coffee plants mature. I start harvesting the coffee and I sell it. And there are no consequences, basically, for me doing that. It's just on the market, no questions asked. Companies buy it, sell it, trade it, serve it to you at the other end of the world. This is like an ecological crime. I know that I sound a bit like wound up about it, but agriculture is a third of climate change and 80% of biodiversity loss. These things are like no joke. These are existential problems we need to wrap our arms around. And for us to just allow the top 7 commodities to be killing global forests is crazy. We need forests.
In the coffee industry, what percentage is sort of new acquisitions, new like deforestation versus existing coffee plantations?
So you're absolutely right that there's a lot of historic deforestation, and then we're trundling along with smaller amounts every year. I would say that unlike cattle and soy, which are also top drivers of deforestation, or palm oil, where you have these giant swaths that go bang, just and you see it in a satellite map from one month to the next. If you're checking satellite maps, it feels kind of horrifying, like a punch in the face. Coffee deforestation is much more death by 1,000 cuts. Drip, 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 drip. It's, we have 12.5 million coffee farms, around 25 million farmers, around 100 million farm workers. It's a lot of small farms. There's some big ones too. There's like a plantation in Brazil that allegedly has more coffee than all of Bolivia combined.
Brazil is the world's largest coffee producer, responsible for roughly a third of global coffee output. Its coffee growing regions like Minas Gerais, Sao Paulo, and Espírito Santo offer ideal conditions: consistent temperatures, ample rainfall, and nutrient-rich soil. Brazil produces both Arabica and Robusta beans, with Arabica making up the majority. The country's coffee industry is massive, involving over 290,000 growers and covering nearly 6.7 million acres. Brazil's coffee exports reached a record $14.7 billion in the 2024-2025 season, a 49.5% increase from the previous year, driven by weather-related price surges. The United States remains Brazil's largest coffee trading partner, importing 7.47 million bags during the 2024-2025 harvest, a 5.65% increase from the previous year. Despite its leading position, Brazil's coffee industry faces big challenges. In August 2025, the U.S. imposed a 50% tariff on Brazilian coffee imports, leading to a 46% decline in exports to the U.S. compared to the previous year. Additionally, climate change poses risks to coffee production, with droughts and frosts affecting yields. Brazil's coffee output is projected to decline by up to 6.4%, primarily due to adverse weather conditions in 2024.
But most coffee is small farms, and so the deforestation is also this drip, 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 which makes it harder to spot. But to your point about how does this pan out in the real world, it's very different country to country. You're so right about historic stuff versus today. Just to come back to Brazil, because it's number one. We know, all of us, like the Amazon. It's sort of the charismatic superstar child of forests, right? But there's this other forest called the Mato Atlântico, the Atlantic forest. It used to be 1.2 million square kilometers. That's like a third of the size of the Amazon. So it was huge. There's less than 10% left. We have killed 90% of that forest. And most of that was actually for coffee. Now, yeah, that started a long time ago, because Brazil was a coffee powerhouse. But coffee cultivation grew by over 105% between 1990 and 2023. That's new deforestation. That's from 0.6 to 1.23 million hectares, according to satellite maps. So, yeah, from 2001 to 2023, we've lost 11 million hectares of forest where there's a lot of coffee cultivation. Not all of that is for coffee. Sometimes coffee enables other things. Let's say that Donna cuts the forest for cattle. Cattle's there for 2 years, and then Donna sells me the land and moves on to cut new forests with her cattle, and I do coffee. My coffee has just enabled Donna's ongoing deforestation for cattle or pulp and paper, a domino. So basically, coffee is driving direct and indirect deforestation to this day. And it has been raping the forests of the world in the tropics for like 100 years.
I'm interested to hear a little bit more. Now that we've cut down the forest and we've put in our bushes, we have both the monoculture, as you say, and we have pesticides. Tell me a little bit more about both of those.
Yes. Okay. So that when I say monoculture versus agroforestry, many people have not really clocked what agroforestry coffee is, but they might have heard about shade-grown coffee. It's essentially the same. Agroforestry coffee is shade-grown coffee. It's coffee grown with lots of trees in and around it. It can be in zebra stripes, it can be in polka dots, it can be in a donut around your coffee farm. It can be some combination of that. Okay, so that's coffee plus trees, basically, is agroforestry coffee. And then in contrast to that, we have full sun monoculture coffee. The stakes are really high for us to turn our bad coffee into good coffee. Of course, we have to stop deforestation. You're right to start with that because it is like kind of existential and maybe the most important thing. But now we've got this coffee, and a lot of it is bad full sun monoculture. If we do it right, if we do it better, shade-grown coffee is 7 to 8 times better in terms of carbon than sun-grown monocultures. That's not just one study, that's like 3 major reputable important studies. And it's not just the carbon, right? Because 7 to 8 times is a big difference. We think that it's maybe 18 times better for biodiversity.
And the motivation to have monoculture full sun coffee is that it's more productive?
It can be more productive. It's certainly easier to mechanize. So in the very short run, you can just like cut all the trees, get your full sun Robusta coffee in a monocropping system with lots of machines and lots of agrochemicals. You dump fertilizer and pesticides and insecticides and fungicides, things like glyphosate and paraquat. But in the long run, actually you kill the soil. And so then you start to have crop failures and reduce yield unless you do ever more chemical inputs. In the short run, it can be seductive, right? And who cares about the biodiversity, right? You have like 61 bird species in monoculture coffee, we think, and you have 243 species in an ideal shade coffee system. Pretty big difference, 61 to 243. And that's just the number of species. That's not even the number of birds in each species, right? And birds, obviously, you don't have birds unless you've got a lot of insects. So it's a great sign that the insect life is thriving and the soil health is good. And also birds are food for apex predators. So it's great for underneath on the trophic chain and up above. It's a good sign, basically. But yeah, a lot of coffee industry folks just have never thought about that and don't care. It's like not their problem, basically.
Can we talk about the pesticides a little bit? Because, I mean, I think about it occasionally. I'm like, okay, we're going to put coffee beans, we're going to grind them up, we're going to put them in the coffee maker, we're going to put hot water on it. And I'm just wondering what else is coming out in that hot water. I know you mentioned paraquat and glyphosate, but let's let our listeners in on what we're talking about. Coffee may be marketed as a comforting daily ritual, but behind the beans lies one of the most pesticide-intensive agricultural systems in the world. Because it's grown in tropical regions where pests and fungi thrive, farmers often rely on extreme chemicals, substances banned in over 80 countries but still used in parts of Latin America. This means workers, often lacking protective gear, are directly exposed to toxic sprays, with studies in Nicaragua and Colombia reporting frequent symptoms of pesticide poisoning, such as nausea, dizziness, and chronic skin issues. The environmental costs are just as severe. Runoff from plantations contaminates streams and rivers, killing aquatic life and polluting community drinking water. What makes this even more troubling is the double standard. Coffee sprayed with hazardous chemicals is exported to wealthier countries where those same pesticides are outlawed for domestic use. With coffee being one of the world's most traded commodities, its pesticide footprint makes it one of the most hazardous industries for both people and the planet.
There's huge amounts of pesticides in coffee. And I should add, when you have monoculture coffee, you basically create a banquet for pests, right? So everything's fine until the day you get a pest, and then boom, you just created this banquet for the pests or ravage your farm. And then, of course, you panic and you dump chemicals all over it. If you have an agroforestry system, it's much slower for the pest to work its way through. And so you create these natural obstacles for coffee pests, like rust is a big one, right? But I would say that, something that we noticed is that the industry has basically been pushing agrochemicals on coffee. That's especially true in Brazil, where there's these enormous subsidies, government subsidies for the chemicals that go into coffee. And so obviously, this is bad for insects because it is, of course, designed to kill the insects. But it's also terrible for the sprayers, all the farmers, right? Coffee is sprayed with pesticides that are literally illegal in the EU because they cause disease and they're acutely toxic. And it's not like Brazilian and Vietnamese and Ugandan and other coffee farmers are getting lots of PPE, right? So pesticide poisoning is very widespread. And when you look at what does it do to farmers and especially to like the sprayers, so often those are farm workers, we're talking about death, loss of consciousness, difficulty breathing, vomiting, dizziness, reduced coordination, visual disorders, skin contact with terabufos can kill you. That's just one chemical. That's one of 30 active pesticide ingredients that are prohibited in the EU, approved in Brazil, and commonly used in Brazilian coffee.
How does that impact the import of Brazilian coffee in the EU, for example, if they know that Brazil is using these pesticides very heavily and they're banned there? Are there warnings? Are there tariffs? Are there exclusions?
Basically, it just comes to Europe, and especially if it's roasted, there are only trace amounts left that are potentially very harmful to consumers. So it's more the workers and the ecosystems that are bearing the brunt, right? And there's one country that's quite strict about trace residues of chemicals when it comes to coffee, which is Japan. Japan is really persnickety compared to the EU and the US. But essentially, the EU and the US are importing coffee that was sprayed with crazy shit that we would not allow if it were next to us. We just happen to be allowing it on our coffee and then drinking it. And we, do pretty minimal testing. There's some stuff that I did not know until I started working at Coffee Watch. I did not know that in the United States, you can use a chemical that was banned in paint thinner to make your decaf. And by the way, decaf is drunk mostly by pregnant women. And the industry's like, no, it's safe. It was banned in paint thinner, but it's used in something that is the process that makes food that we put in our bodies. That's nuts.
Most people don't realize that a lot of decaf coffee in the United States is made using methylene chloride, a solvent once banned in paint thinners because of its toxicity. The chemical can slow down the nervous system and, in high enough doses, can even cause organ damage. While Europe and Canada have much stricter limits on its use, the U.S. still allows it in the decaffeination process. What's wild is that there are safer alternatives, yet because methylene chloride is cheap and efficient, many major coffee brands stick with it, keeping a practice alive that consumer advocacy groups have been fighting to ban for years. Can we go back to Japan for a second? In their persnicketyness, as you put it, what are they doing? They're importing coffee and they're testing it for trace chemicals. What are they looking for?
So one of the things that clued me into Japan being more persnickety is that Japan was so upset about the high pesticide residue levels of chlorpyrifos in coffee that exceeded the minimum set by Japanese health authorities, that it almost banned Kenyan coffee, which is a lot of that chemical in coffee, in Kenyan farms. And so then Kenya sort of like panicked and changed its policy and practice in country, and other countries got a bit more worried about this. So that's a good example of a consumer country doing something to protect its consumers from trace elements of potentially really harmful chemicals. But I just come back to this, right? As a coffee drinker, I drink coffee. I love coffee. Of course, I care about my health and your health and the health of the many, many, many millions of consumers of coffee. There are 2 billion cups of coffee consumed a day. So there's a lot of us drinking a lot of it all the time for pretty much our whole lives. So good if it's not filled with poison, eh? But even if roasting it or turning it into pods or instant protects us by eliminating some of the chemicals that were used in growing coffee, I am still really worried about the ecosystem where it was grown. And I'm truly disturbed about what happens to the workers. They get like little handkerchiefs instead of masks. They basically have no choice but to do this. There's often no safe storage and disposal. So kids can play with contaminated jerry cans. At least in Brazil, there's a much stronger civil society than in a lot of other coffee growing countries, and stronger medical record keeping, and more law enforcement generally. And an investigation found that from the Brazilian National Toxicological Information System, there were 21 deaths and 817 poisonings caused by agricultural pesticides in Minas Gerais in just 1 year. Minas Gerais, where half of Brazilian coffee is grown. It's like the coffee heartland of Brazil, basically. And a lot of coffee farm workers and farmers are very poor, so they don't even go to the doctor or the hospital. So they just like deal with it at home, right? So is that even just maybe the tip of the iceberg? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a toxicologist in Brazil, but I find that very concerning, that investigation shook me.
Before I move on, I'm just curious about this roasting process. How is it that the roasting process removes the chemical toxins? And I'm just curious if you can describe, I don't know that I've ever seen a coffee bush, but the coffee bean, is it inside a shell?
Oh, no. So coffee beans grow in bushes, mostly in this sort of tropical area. There's belt of the tropics, sometimes under trees, sometimes full sun, as we just described. You harvest them as little berries. The berries turn red, and then you pick them off, or if it's highly mechanized and it's grown in rows, that you have a machine that will go through. And then you take the berries are like little cherries almost. So you take the pulp, got to get the pulp off to get to the bean. Inside that little red thing is that delightful bean. And it starts out, we call it green coffee. So it doesn't turn brown like what we're used to seeing in a store or at home in bags. It doesn't turn brown until after you roast it. Roasting is what makes it get brown. So by and large, the Global South will sell green coffee, and then we roast it pretty close to where it's consumed. I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a roaster, but roasting removes toxins by burning them off through heat. And it can eliminate some pesticides, but it usually fails to remove deeply penetrated pesticides.
When we hear about fair trade and different kinds of certifications on coffee. Explain what kind of ecosystem we're stepping into there and what it means and how it works.
Donna, I'm so glad you asked this question. This is not a small, unimportant question. This is a hugely important question for the future of sustainability in coffee. You kind of hit the nail on the head here because, to the best of my knowledge, about half of global coffee is certified. But that has not meant that half of global coffee is chemical-free, deforestation-free, living income, no slaves, no kids, all those things that we've been talking about. Certification has not fixed that by and large. So I think for a long time, many people, including myself, we thought that coffee certification would provide the keys to industry transformation, to system change, to a better, industry where you're making the world a better place with every cup. And that just hasn't really happened. There's a couple of reasons. Big certifications in coffee are 4C, Cafe Practices, Rainforest Alliance, Fair Trade, Organic. And there's a bunch of smaller ones like B Corp and Smithsonian Bird Friendly. Most certifications do some things, but not others. Organic, for example, it does look at chemicals, but it doesn't look at deforestation. It doesn't guarantee agroforestry. It doesn't pay a living income price. And they will tell you it's literally not our problem. They don't say, we hate forests and we hate workers, we love slavery, we're on team slavery. No, they don't say that. They just say, this is not our wheelhouse. If people want coffee that deals with those things, they need other certifications. And so my response is like, okay, but busy people in the supermarket, they see the seal and they think that your coffee means like it's good. I mean, good on you that you're not poisoning the planet and workers. Like, thank you for that. At least you're not poisoning small children, but how do you know there's no kids in your coffee? You don't do anything really about child labor, living income.
And who does?
Different certifications do different higgledy-piggledy parts of the puzzle. Not a single certification guarantees a living income price for the farmers. And I think that bears repeating. Zero. No certifications. And also no certifications look at a living wage for farm workers, right? Because you have like maybe 25 million farmers, but about 100 million farm workers. So literally those people, it's like they didn't exist. They have no living wage. And by the way, they are not earning a living wage. Almost none of them earn anything even close to a living wage. Most of them are in poverty or extreme poverty. And that's just certified. We're certifying poverty. As a consumer who likes to buy certified things, I feel gypped.
Hey, it's Dana. I'm just jumping in for a quick moment here. If you're into the conversations we're having here on One Bite is Everything and you want to stay connected beyond the episode, I'd love for you to become an OB Insider. It's the best way to keep the dialogue going. No spam, no fluff, just some thoughtful updates, extra resources, and sometimes even questions I don't have answers to yet. Because honestly, I don't know everything. That's why I'm asking all of these questions. Anyway, I think we can figure things out together. You'll also get the chance to opt into other ways to support farmers, advocate for better food systems, or just stay curious. So, if that sounds like your kind of thing, head to the show notes and sign up to be an OB Insider. I'd love to have you with us. Now let's get back to the episode.
I was very naive and I thought that certified coffee was good coffee. But I actually was shocked when we found, so we have done a number of field investigations at Coffee Watch in the last year. We've published 6 reports. And our very first report, I literally couldn't believe it. Like I reread it several times. It kept me up at night. They found, the field investigation in Yunnan, China, found that there are these ghost farms that were coffee laundering into certified farms. Right? So the certified farms are inflating their volume with coffee from uncertified farms where there's lots of abuses happening. And in the certified farms where they are retailing this coffee, as you said, there's this little box ticking exercise. You tick these boxes, you pay. But in the uncertified farms, which the coffee was going to the same places, right? People working 12-hour days, 7 days a week, 3 months without a single day off. No medical care, no PPE. We found child labor, exploitation of indigenous people. Frankly, I didn't think that happened all the time. I thought that's more like, oh, maybe a bad apple, but no, it was like every single farm that our investigators had gone to. Okay, is this just like a China problem? Is this a Yunnan thing? Because overwhelmingly Chinese coffee comes from Yunnan. Then this investigation in Mexico revealed, no, the certifications, that the coffee is in violation of their policy over and over and over. I was like, hey, China, Mexico. What about Brazil? Oh my God, we found certified farms with slavery and human trafficking. That's nuts. And then team went out to Colombia and found again, over and over, abuses that are exactly against what the certifications say they stand for. So yeah, I feel really agitated about this, as you can probably tell, because the tone of voice is changing, but I think it's messed up and I feel gypped. I feel like ripped off, basically, because my whole life, pretty much, I tried to buy certified coffee. And I thought that meant that people had a life of dignity and their kids are going to school. And it turns out, no, they're not even earning a living income. Forget like a development income or wealth, educate. No, it's not an educate. This is like basic. They're not living. That living income is exactly what it sounds like. It's basic food. It's basic medical care. Your kids go to school. So yeah, I was horrified. That really pissed me off.
I'm interested to hear what Coffee Watch is doing, what its strategy is for addressing these concerns.
So I don't know if we're doing a very good job at this, but my hope is that we will bring accountability to the industry. I hope and pray that Coffee Watch can be a kind of Greenpeace for the coffee industry or an Amnesty International for the coffee industry, which has so far gotten such a free pass, just getting away with murder.
Tell me how you're approaching that.
Yeah, so we do field investigations to document abuses in coffee supply chains in countries where it's grown, like China, Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, teams in other countries right now. And the idea is to go usually undercover and talk to people. And what's crazy is that just doing that, you find one abuse after another. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. We've even found now sexual exploitation, rape. It's so disturbing, these investigations. So when we finish them, we turn them into reports, often with wonderful sister NGOs. Those NGOs are amazing. Without them, we would never be able to do this. I don't believe in, a Western organization parachuting into coffee growing countries and sort of like doing their thing. I believe in working with local NGOs who are rooted in the communities and understand, like in Mexico, we worked with this group called Empower and a group called Prodesk. They're amazing. They're in it to win it for justice for communities in Mexico for the long haul. So we rely a lot on them. We do then these reports and campaigns. Our stuff has been in like the New York Times, the Guardian, Spiegel, Le Monde, El País. We try really hard to get these reports covered by the media. And then we have gone from 0 to about 1 million views on social media. So we're trying really hard to reach people across every platform, even ones owned by Nazi-adjacent billionaires. We're still on those platforms, still trying to reach people. So many people care about coffee. It's not like palm oil, where, half of what you leave the supermarket with has palm oil in it, but people didn't know that and they didn't choose that. Coffee, people buy it on purpose. They put it in their body on purpose. So our hope is that this media work and the social media work and these reports will raise awareness and transform how consumers demand better coffee.
In an effort to confront slavery-tainted coffee, advocates like Etelle turn to strategic litigation by filing a Section 307 petition with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the CBP. This legal tool allows citizens to push for a ban on imports linked to forced labor, and Etelle and her team built one of the strongest petitions CBP has seen, complete with testimonies, government reports, supply chain maps, and extensive evidence. While the agency hasn't yet ruled, CBP engaged constructively, even pointing out weaknesses that were later strengthened in an amended filing. Now, with multiple cases in progress, the stakes are clear. If CBP rules in their favor, it could trigger a withhold release order, effectively blocking slavery-linked coffee from entering the United States, a move that would set a powerful precedent and likely reveal just how much worse the problem runs beneath the surface.
There's this new law that's supposed to kick in January 1st, 2026 in Europe that bars deforestation in the 7 high-risk commodities that are driving global deforestation, including coffee, which is number 6, right? So if that law comes into effect, then all the satellite monitoring that we're doing at Coffee Watch, because we do satellite monitoring to check for deforestation in coffee and do reports on that. If the law kicks in and doesn't get trashed or derailed or delayed, which is a possibility, unfortunately, then we would be able to bring cases for global forests. We would be able to file litigation to stop deforestation. That would be kind of amazing too. So we're kind of waiting with bated breath.
With a global focus on one industry, it's got to be overwhelming, even though you focused in on coffee, but it's a global issue. How did you end up doing this then?
Oh, good question. When I used to work in really just human rights for the first 12 and a half years of my life, I interned in these war crimes tribunals and worked at Human Rights Watch and Amnesty. And then I realized, we probably won't have any human rights on a dead planet. So maybe I should work on environmental stuff too. That's when I hopped over to Greenpeace. So then that's when I realized only 2% of philanthropic dollars, give or take, go to the climate fight. And only 8% of climate dollars go to changing agriculture. And that's extra messed up because agriculture is driving 1/3 of climate change and 80% of mass extinction. So if you could say that climate is like the orphan of global philanthropy, because I don't know, people want to give money to golf courses and opera and whatever else they're giving money to. So climate's like the orphan of philanthropy, and agriculture is kind of the orphan of the climate space. And when I was at Greenpeace and Mighty Earth, that's when I realized, wait, this is so weird. Coffee's the number 6 driver of deforestation, but nobody works on it at all, at all. So it's kind of the orphan of the orphan of the orphan. So that's why I thought, okay, let's start Coffee Watch.
And you started about a year ago?
10 months ago now.
Is there anything that you were hoping I would ask you that I didn't?
Oh, well, one thing that I have noticed is a lot of times when I talk to people about coffee, they walk away almost sobbing and feeling really depressed. And I think it's good to end just on a little note of hope, which is it absolutely does not have to be this way. We have made this weird choice to opt for child labor coffee and rape coffee and torture coffee and slavery and human trafficking and deforestation coffee and monoculture pesticide soaked coffee. But that's nuts and totally unnecessary. And we already have many good examples of companies that do things right. And they are organic and they are direct trade and they are doing due diligence for human rights and they are making sure that their packaging is compostable and recyclable and they are transparent and traceable. There are companies like that all over the world. I'm in Denmark. So, here there's like slow forest coffee and Vadenskova coffee. In London, there's Kiss the Hippo. In Indonesia, there's orangutan coffee. In the US, there's all the Smithsonian bird-friendly certified coffee. That's a really ethical, good option. Equal Exchange treats its workers much better than normal coffee does.
You have a list?
So we have this one-stop shop page on our website that tells you all the good things you can do, how you can vote with your wallet, how you can find good ethical coffee no matter where you are, America, Australia, South Africa, Senegal, Denmark, Brasilia, whatever. It also tells you all the petitions you can sign for good coffee, because those help too. We went and we found all the petitions other organizations have created to make coffee more ethical. And we put them all in a one-stop shop to make it easy. Bing, 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 bing. I'm guessing signing all those petitions, kind of the equivalent of a week of drinking ethical coffee, probably. And people can also tap into this gorgeous power that we have. You have elected representatives. You can call them, you can write on their social, you can email them, you can visit them. You can tell them, you drink coffee, I drink coffee, coffee industry sucks. What are you doing about it? Simple as that. Just a one-liner is enough to really register with your elected representative. And like I was saying, there are laws out there that have been proposed. There are bills that could pass that would change the coffee industry and save global forests. And also industry is very sensitive on certification schemes. So, if you want to vote with your wallet and buy really ethical coffee, you can do that. Or you can keep drinking the exact same coffee and just take pictures of yourself with it and write the company and say, I am your loyal customer. This is not okay with me. Where is your living income commitment? Show me proof. I want you to pay living income to the farmers, or I want you to go organic. It's so uncool that you're poisoning the planet. Companies are super sensitive to this stuff too. So you can speak out with companies on their social or whatever. You can speak out with your representative. You can vote with your wallet. You can sign petitions. You can volunteer with Coffee Watch. We have a whole list of things that people can do. So you can become like a ninja for coffee justice. And actually, coffee is just the beginning. If you do that, then you can do it for your apparel, for your chocolate. This is just the beginning of a beautiful love story between you and ethical life. And you don't have to be perfect. No one should beat themselves up for not being perfect. I am not perfect. The key is we just lean in and try and be your best.
Your morning coffee shouldn't come with a hidden cost. Not to the planet, not to workers, and not to your health. But as we've heard today, the reality behind the beans is often darker than the roast. Still, there's hope, because change doesn't start with perfection. It starts with awareness, with asking questions, with buying differently, speaking up, and remembering that our decisions around food and beverages, something that we incorporate into our everyday lives, is one of the most important levers that we have. Thank you so much to Etelle Higonnet for showing us how something as ordinary as coffee can reveal everything that's wrong and everything that's still possible in our food system. If this conversation moved you, taught you something, or just made you think differently, can you leave a 5-star rating and a review wherever you are listening to this podcast episode right now? It helps One Bite is Everything bring on the best guests with the deepest insights and the hottest takes. I would so appreciate your effort. And if you want to stay connected beyond this episode, become an OB Insider. It's our way of continuing the conversation together, sharing honest reflections, helpful links, and sometimes just asking better questions. You'll find the sign-up link in the show notes. I'd love to have you in the circle. Special thanks to my co-producer, Sonia Dillon, and to Russell Chapa, our sound designer, engineer, and musician. Before you go, here's one thing that you can do. Tomorrow morning, when you grab your coffee, just take a moment to look at the label. What's there? What's missing? That tiny pause. That's where change starts. I'm your host, Dana DiPrima, and this is One Bite is Everything. I hope that you'll join me here again next week. And until then, eat and drink like it matters, because it does.